Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with the Republican Party's outright war on women. Ever since the conservative Supreme Court justices made it extremely clear that not only would they refuse to block extremist laws like the Texas Bounty Law, but that they are on track to fulfilling one of the Christian right's most durable goals toward creating an American theocracy. And frankly, the reason each of those members of the right-wing court was put on that court in the first place, namely gutting or just going all in and overturning Roe v. Wade. And since the conservative Supreme Court majority has made that clear, Republican-led states have been just tripping over themselves, jostling to one-up each other with the most draconian, extreme abortion restrictions. There's Florida, where today Governor Ron DeSantis signed a law banning abortions at 15 weeks, with no exceptions, none for rape or incest, following Arizona Governor Doug Ducey's lead 2 weeks ago. And Idaho, which, like Texas, passed a 6-week ban before most women even know they're pregnant. That law is being held up temporarily by the state's Supreme Court. But Oklahoma saw the Texas law and said, hold my beer, with Oklahoma making it a felony to perform any abortion except one performed to save the life of the mother. All of these bills are dependent on what the courts decide, and they don't take effect immediately. But now one state has succeeded in becoming the very first state since Roe v. Wade was implemented almost half a century ago to force all of its abortion clinics to close. And that is Kentucky, where yesterday Republicans were able to override the Democratic governor's veto of a law that immediately bans abortion after 15 weeks and the receipt of an abortion medication by mail. It also requires that clinics cremate or bury fetal remains. And it's that last stipulation and other regulations, like requiring the state to certify providers that dispense abortion medication, that have caused Kentucky's 2 abortion clinics to stop taking patients. Providing for the cremation or burial of to the cost of an abortion. The law also requires a new electronic monitoring system to track abortions, which would cost the state $1 million and provide zero funding to create this massive government surveillance system. Today, Planned Parenthood and the ACLU sued to block the law. But even if that works temporarily, God help the appeals, because we are very likely careening towards the end of Roe v. Wade based on the extremely conservative 6-3 Supreme Court, who are likely just waiting eagerly for an appeal of one of these laws to land at their door. And make no mistake, we got here because of a campaign that started in the late 1970s and 80s, when conservative leaders realized they could rally voters around abortion, which was far better PR than their original obsession, protecting the tax-free status of segregated schools. Ever since, it's been their fever dream to take over the courts and overturn Roe. It's the promise that they made to conservative Christian voters that helped them to secure Senate seats and sometimes the White House. It's part of how our disgraced, twice impeached former president won in 2016 by promising to nominate judges who would overturn Roe, even though he messed around and said the quiet part out loud, that women should be punished for having abortions. And Addison, Mitchell McConnell brought that dream to fruition with a Senate that refused to even hold hearings for Merrick Garland and instead jammed in 3 new right-wing justices. But here's the thing. This campaign has worked for Republicans all this time because abortion has been legal. 1 in 4 women will have an abortion at some point in their lives, and a majority of Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. There is just no telling what happens once that right is gone. And tens of millions of American women wake up in Gilead with their pregnant bodies as state property. Rape and incest victims having to risk their lives to have abortions. Teenagers and young women saddled with the huge costs of raising children they never planned to have or didn't want to have, with their red states saying, well, that's your problem now, because we don't provide free preschool. We don't provide Medicaid. Just the sanctimonious right wing counting the babies. So are Republicans ready for the political consequences of achieving one of their biggest dreams? To discuss, I'm joined now by Kentucky State Representative Rachel Roberts and Rachel Bitecofer, political scientist and strategist, as well as a host of The Cycle on Substack. And Representative Roberts, I do want to start with you to talk about Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky, I guess, has won the race to the bottom because these states do seem to be trying to one-up each other to say, no, we can be the most restrictive. Talk about what that means for Kentucky women.
So this bill was House Bill 3, and it was called regularly the abortion omnibus bill, and many of us called it the ominous bill. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a whole bunch of ideas from other states crammed into one bill with the express purpose of limiting care for women across the state. Lawmakers on the floor said it wasn't their express intention to close clinics, but we knew that it was, and today is that day, and it's a hard day. There are women who are expecting to have medical services today that were turned away.
And the thing is, just to be pragmatic here, forcing women to give birth is not the beginning and the end, right? I mean, luckily, Kentucky is a state with a Democratic governor, so there was an expansion of Medicaid. They didn't at first know it was Medicaid, it was Connect, right? But at least there is a Medicaid expansion there. So at least there's health care for women. However, this is one of the poorest states in the country, the highest poverty rates, I'm sure high child poverty rates. I doubt that Republicans also passed a bill. Did they pass a bill for free preschool to make sure that these children have child care? Did no bill that way? Was there a bill to help maternal mortality or to help anything to do with raising children and making sure that they didn't starve, to get free meals at school, anything like that?
You're exactly right, Joy. And the state of Kentucky has problems in this area. We have 9% of children in Kentucky are being raised by their grandparents, which is in large part due to the opioid epidemic that we have in the state. There's about 90,000 children being raised by their grandparents. We have we're number 7 in teen pregnancy in the nation. We have some of the worst maternal health care outcomes in the state, and it's even worse for women of color. It's 3 to 4 times worse than it is for Caucasian women. And here in Kentucky, we are at double the national average for poor maternal health care outcomes. We are a state that should be looking for ways to encourage people to have healthy families if, when, and how they are ready to, and encouraging passing laws to help those families be able to thrive here in the state. And that is not what we are doing. Instead, we are saying loudly that we do not trust women to make their own healthcare decisions. And it's even worse than that. I proposed an amendment to this bill to say at least, could we please put provisions in here for the victims of rape and incest? That amendment was not only shot down, but as legislators, we have the choice to vote or not vote on those things. You can abstain from a vote, but 68 of my colleagues, 68 of them were willing to put their name on the board and shoot down that amendment to say that not even in the cases of rape and incest will we make this care, this vital care, available to women in Kentucky.
Under his eye. And I can tell you why. There's states not too far away that are saying you can marry a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or 14-year-old. So that's rape, right? If you're trying to impregnate a little kid. But they're like, you know what? We're not going to stop that either. Rachel Bitecofer, let me bring you in here. There is going to essentially be a Mason-Dixon line where below the Mason-Dixon line is Gilead, where women, and they can claim they don't want women to be arrested. BS. Women will be arrested. There was already one arrested in Texas, and they said, oopsie, because they realized it's bad PR. Don't do that yet. But that's where we're going. Let's show this map. There are 26 states that are already itching to outright ban abortion, and it's going to look like a map of red America. They're doing this because it helps them get elected among evangelical voters, Rachel Bitecofer. But the majority of women and men don't want this, if you look at the polls. Why is this still so effective for Republicans, and why have Democrats not been effective in pushing back when it's not what people really want?
Yeah, well, it's true. And I mean, when you look at polling within these red states, these bills are far more radical. I mean, they're a little bit more pro-life, quote unquote, leaning in those red electorates, but their distribution's not much different. They relatively want safe, legal access to at least early term abortion in those states. And what they're going to wake up to is Gilead. And I will say this, being part of the reason why the Republicans are doing what they're doing is that they are, they've kind of designed and are also operating in a system where they have immunity. There's no democratic accountability in these states anymore because they have spent the last 10 years de-democratizing them. What we're seeing now is a hyper effort, but that infrastructure has been a long time built. And, it is true that evangelical voters want this. This is like the treasured egg, but it's really important to remember movement politics, the right movement politics, that stuff is all articulated by strategy. Somebody looked at the issue of abortion in the 1970s, late 70s, realized there was a potential to wedge it if they defined it in this moral terms, because up till then people were thinking of it in more medical terms, and then weaponized this electorate. And it has actually proven to be an incredibly powerful thing, right? But its use is going to run out. And if we see any of these laws upheld at the Supreme Court level, if we see severe erosion of Roe, and don't get me wrong, 15-week bans with no abortion or no exemptions for rape or incest, that is radical, radical stuff right there. There's nothing, nothing moderate.
Well, let me ask you a question. Absolutely. Let me ask you a question, because it's all cool until the bodies start being shown. And I worked in local news. You have some teenage rape victims that are dying because they tried to do a self-abortion, and take too many of whatever the pills are. They do that underground and refuse to go to the clinic because it's illegal and they're scared. It's all cool until people start dying. And good luck trying to hide that. Ask Vladimir Putin how that works out. I want to ask you, Rachel Bitecofer, whether or not this has been a good issue because abortion was legal. Now that it's going to be illegal across these red states, what happens? Because white women, let's just be clear, have voted majority Republican since the 1960s. It's been very solid, even when there's a woman on the ballot often, right? But what happens to that vote? Do you see that vote starting to get shaky when their daughters are the ones who are in the crosshairs of this? When their sisters, do you see them moving somewhat off the team if you start to see the bodies, the people starting to die or suffer?
And you don't even need to wait till that moment happens, right? Because here's the thing, abortion politics over the course of the 90s through the 2000s, it benefited them. They're so good at rhetoric, right? And they coined the pro-life movement. That really started to define abortion. You saw a small erosion in access support from that effort, right? But, now the politics are the opposite. We're under a 5-alarm fire. There's no need to wait until somebody actually dies. What you have to do is paint a picture for the electorate of what's coming.